The sun had almost disappeared behind the clouds, and the road was quiet and wet from the evening rain. Rameen was walking home from her shift at the small roadside diner, her shoes soaked and her backpack heavy with groceries. She worked long hours, sometimes double shifts, just to earn enough to pay for her mother's medicine and food. Life hadn't been easy for the 19-year-old girl. But she never complained. She always smiled, even when her hands were sore and her stomach was empty. As she reached a bend near the old railway bridge, she saw a car parked awkwardly on the side of the road. Its front tire was flat, and an old man stood beside it, looking confused and helpless. He was well-dressed, wearing a beige coat and a dark hat, but he looked lost, like someone who didn't belong on this quiet, forgotten road. He waved weakly at passing cars, but none stopped. Rameen paused, her heart already telling her what to do. She crossed the street carefully and walked toward him, wiping rain from her face. "Sir, do you need help?" she asked gently, her voice calm and respectful. The old man looked at her in surprise, then sighed deeply. "Ah, child. Yes, I think I do." His voice was soft but tired, as if he hadn't spoken to someone kindly in a long time. He explained that he didn't know how to change the tire, and his phone had no signal. He was visiting someone in the area, but his GPS had stopped working. Rameen nodded and said, "I don't know everything about cars, but I can try." She set down her bag and knelt beside the car, her clothes getting dirty from the wet road. She searched the trunk and found the tools. Remembering how she had once watched a mechanic fix a tire outside the diner, bit by bit, she loosened the bolts, her fingers trembling from cold and effort. The old man tried to help, but mostly just stood and watched, amazed at her confidence and kindness. "You're doing a good job," he said quietly. Rameen smiled without looking up. "Thank you, sir." It took her nearly 20 minutes, but finally the spare tire was in place, and the flat one was back. In the trunk, her arms ached, her knees were soaked, but her heart felt full. She stood up, wiping her hands on her scarf, and smiled. "There, it should be good now." The old man looked at her with deep eyes that held some kind of sorrow. "You didn't have to do all this," he said, reaching into his coat. "At least let me pay you something." But Rameen shook her head quickly. "No, sir, it's okay. I just wanted to help." "Why?" he asked, genuinely confused. She looked at the dark clouds above, then back at him. "Because sometimes the world is too hard already. We should make it softer for each other." There was a pause between them, a silence filled with something unspoken. Then the old man asked, "What's your name, child?" "Rameen," she replied. "Rameen Zafar." Suddenly, the old man's face changed. He froze, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. "Zafar," he whispered, as if the name had punched the breath from his chest. "Yes, sir." "Why?" she asked, blinking. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at the wet road, then at her face, and something broke inside him, I think. "I knew someone with that name long ago," he said quietly. "Is your mother's name Farida?" Rameen nodded slowly, confused. "Yes." "Do you know her?" The old man took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and then spoke. "I think I do, and if I'm right, I owe her an apology." Before Rameen could ask anything else, he said, "Where do you live?" "It's not safe to walk in the rain. I'll drive you." She hesitated, then gave him directions to her small neighborhood. As they drove, the silence in the car was thick, filled with hidden thoughts and memories. Rameen didn't know what was going on, but something about the man's voice, the way he said her mother's name, made her heart uneasy. When they reached her house, a small one-room home with a tin roof, her mother opened the door. She stepped out into the light of the car headlights, holding a shawl around her shoulders. The old man stepped out too, and the moment her mother saw him, she gasped and dropped the shawl. Her lips trembled, and her voice came out barely above a whisper. You? The old man looked at her and said, Farida, I'm sorry. I think I made the biggest mistake of my life. And with that, the storm truly began, not outside, but in their hearts. The rain had stopped. But the tension in the air was heavier than ever. Ramon stood between her mother and the old man, both frozen in silence. The world seemed to blur around them, as if time had paused to let their hearts catch up. Her mother, Farida, stared at the man with wide eyes filled with old pain. Her lips trembled, and she whispered, Mr. Mazar, is it really you? The old man removed his hat slowly, his white hair soaked with rain. Yes, Farida, he said softly, it's me. Ramon looked at both of them, confused and uneasy. Amy, you know him? She asked. Farida nodded slowly but did not smile. This man used to be my boss, she said, her voice shaking. He's the one who fired me. Rameen's heart sank. Her stomach felt tight. The man she had helped, who she thought was just a stranger, was the reason her mother had suffered for years. He was the man who took away her mother's job, her pride, her future. And now he stood here, in their yard, soaked in rain, with guilt written all over his face. I didn't know. Ramon whispered, almost to herself. Mazar looked at her with regret. You shouldn't blame her, he said. Your mother did nothing wrong. Farida stepped back, her arms crossed tightly, as if shielding herself from old wounds. You had the power to defend me, she said quietly, but you stayed silent. I was a coward, Mazar admitted. I was afraid of the board, the company's reputation. I let them blame you without proof, and I signed the paper. There was silence again, broken only by the soft dripping of water from the roof. Ramon stared at him, trying to understand this man once powerful, now broken. Why are you here? She finally asked, her voice sharper. Now? Why now? Mazar looked down, ashamed. I came to visit a property I own near the old market, he said, but when my car broke down, I didn't expect to meet anyone, let alone the daughter of the woman I failed. Farida sighed and turned to go inside. I don't need your apologies, she said. I've already cried enough. But Ramon stopped her gently, holding her hand. Amy, wait, she said. He came back after all these years. Maybe, just maybe, there's more to this. Mazar looked at them both, then said something unexpected. May I come in? He asked. Please, just for a few minutes. I promise I won't stay long. Farida hesitated, then gave a slight nod. They all stepped inside the small room, which smelled of tea and warm blankets. Ramon quickly wiped a stool for him and made some tea, her hands moving fast, her heart still racing. Mazar sat silently, looking around the humble home. His eyes stopped on an old picture on the wall, a younger Farida holding a baby in her arms. That's you? He asked, looking at Ramon. Yes, she replied shortly. You raised her well, he said to Farida. She's kind, strong, and brave. She helped me when no one else would. Farida looked away, hiding the small tear forming in her eye. Ramon placed the tea in front of him. Why are you really here? She asked. Is it just guilt? Mazar took a sip and nodded. Yes. And no. He took a small envelope from his coat and placed it on the table. This is for you, he said to Farida. It's not to erase the past, but to say sorry. The way I should have done years ago. Farida didn't touch the envelope. I don't want money, she said. Mazar smiled gently. It's not money, it's a letter. Ramon opened it slowly and read the letter aloud. It was a written apology, signed and dated, admitting that Farida had been falsely accused and unfairly dismissed. It also included an offer of scholarship, fund in Rameen's name, and a job opportunity at his company if she wished to take it. I don't want pity, Farida said again, but her voice was softer now. Mazar nodded. It's not pity, it's redemption. Ramon looked at both of them and whispered, sometimes people don't get a second chance. But when they do, maybe they should take it. The air was still, but the storm had passed, at least for now. In the quiet of the small home, something old had broken, and maybe something new was just beginning to heal. The rain had stopped completely, but the weight in Farida's heart remained heavy. The moment Mr. Mazar stepped into her home, her mind had been pulled back to the worst day of her life. Now, sitting beside her daughter and across from the man who had once been her boss, the memories returned. Sharp and painful, Ramon sat silently, holding the letter, unsure of what to feel. She had always known her mother had lost her job unfairly, but she never knew the full story, so she asked, softly, "Amy, what really happened that day?" Farida closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let the past speak. "It was a Thursday," she began, her voice distant. "I remember because I had packed your lunch that morning before I left for work. You were just 6 years old." She looked at Ramon and smiled weakly. "I worked at a big office in the city. I cleaned the floors, dusted the windows, made sure everything was in place before the employees arrived." She paused, her hands folding nervously in her lap. "That day, I was called into the manager's room. They said something was missing. Necklace. Something expensive from one of the executives." Mazar looked down, ashamed. "They checked my bag, searched my locker. They didn't find anything, but still. They accused me," Farida continued, her voice shaking. "I kept saying I didn't do it, but no one listened. They said it was a bad image for the company. They needed to let someone go to calm the staff." Ramon felt her throat tighten. "You mean they fired you just like that?" she asked. Farida nodded, her eyes wet. "Just like that. No proof, no hearing, just a signature." Mazar finally spoke. "That signature was mine." His voice was filled with regret, and his hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "I didn't believe the accusation. I never did. But the board pushed me. They said someone needed to take the blame. I should have stood up, but I didn't." He looked at Farida, his eyes honest. "And I've lived with that guilt every day since." Ramon was quiet, trying to imagine her mother walking home that day. Broken, tired, and afraid, she imagined. Her hiding the pain behind a smile, cooking dinner as if nothing had happened. And all these years, she had never once complained, never spoken about it. "Amy," Ramon whispered, "why didn't you tell me?" Farida touched her daughter's cheek gently. "Because I didn't want you to grow up hating people. I wanted you to be kind, not bitter." Rameen's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, swallowing the lump in her throat. Mazar reached into his coat and pulled out a small folder. Inside was an old photo a company event years ago. In the picture, Fida stood at the edge, dressed in a plain uniform, smiling softly. "I kept this," he said, "because even back then, I saw your honesty. I just didn't have the courage to fight for it." Farida didn't respond, but her expression softened slightly. Ramon took the photo and held it close, looking at her mother's young face. "You were beautiful," she said, with a small smile. Farida laughed lightly through her tears. "I still am, just a little older." The tension in the room shifted. Just a little. Years of pain didn't disappear in a moment. But the truth had started to breathe again. Mazar looked at Ramon, his voice firm now. "I don't expect forgiveness, not from you, not from her, but if you'll allow me. I want to make things right." Ramon nodded slowly. "Sometimes the best apology is not words, but actions." Farida looked at both of them, then stood up quietly. "I need some air," she said, stepping outside, her shawl wrapped tightly around her as she stepped into the cool evening. She looked up at the sky. It was clearing, stars slowly beginning to appear. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe a little deeper inside the house. Ramon and Mazar remained seated. The silence no longer heavy, but thoughtful. They didn't speak because some moments don't need words, only patience, truth, and a little time to heal. The smell of warm lentils filled the room. Ramon stood near the small stove, quietly stirring the pot of rice while glancing toward the door. Her mother hadn't returned inside yet, and the old man, Mr. Mazar, was still seated at the edge. Of the wooden cot, he didn't speak, but his eyes traveled across the tiny room. From the old sewing machine in the corner to the fading family photo on the wall. Everything in the house spoke of struggle, but also dignity. Would you like to eat with us? Ramon asked softly. Mazar looked up, a bit surprised. I don't want to impose, he said. You helped change the tire. I helped you with tea. Now, let's share food. She replied with a small smile. He nodded. Then yes, thank you, Ramon. Laid out the plates, plain metal ones slightly bent at the edges from years of use. She placed some rice and lentils on each plate and added a small piece of pickle on the side. It was a simple meal, but made with care. Mazar picked up the plate with both hands and said, This reminds me of my childhood. It's been a long time since I ate food that smelled like home. They ate mostly in silence, except for the quiet sounds of spoons tapping the plates. Just as they finished, the door creaked open and Farida stepped back in, her eyes red but her face calm. She paused for a moment, then sat down beside her daughter, not looking at Mazar. I used to make this same meal when Ramon was a baby. She said quietly, We had little, but she always ate first. Mazar put down his spoon slowly and nodded. You raised her well. There was a long pause. Ha! And then Farida spoke again, her voice flat. Why are you really here, Mr. Mazar? You brought a letter, a photo, and memories I buried long ago. But what do you want from us? Took a deep breath. I came here by accident, but staying. That's not an accident, he said. I've lived with guilt for years. My company is big, my home is large, but I've never had peace. He looked at Ramon. When she helped me today, I saw something in her. Something that reminded me of the people I failed. Farida stared at him, not blinking. So now you want peace. After so many years? She asked. He didn't answer right away. I don't expect forgiveness, he said at last, but I want to help, not with pity, but because it's the right thing. He pulled out another envelope from his coat, thicker than the last. Ramon took it and opened it carefully. Inside were documents, a scholarship form, a letter of recommendation, and a job offer. Her hands trembled as she read through the pages. You want me to work at your company? She asked in disbelief. Mazar nodded. Yes. Not because of your mother, but because of you. You helped a stranger in the rain, even when you had nothing to gain. That's the kind of person any company would be lucky to have. Farida remained silent, but her eyes watched closely. She had spent her life protecting her daughter from the pain she herself had suffered. Now, someone from that painful past was offering her daughter a future. Ramon looked at her mother, unsure. Ami, should I accept it? She asked. Farida didn't answer right away. Then she spoke gently. This home taught you to be kind, but the world out there will test you if you think you're ready. Go and show them what a kind heart can do. Ramon nodded slowly, her eyes shining with emotion. Mazar exhaled deeply, as if a heavy stone had been lifted from his chest. I'll send a car tomorrow morning, he said. It's a small start, but maybe the beginning of something better. He stood up, placed his hat back on his head, and walked to the door before stepping out. He turned and said, Farida, I may never deserve forgiveness, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be someone worthy of it. And with that, he stepped out into the quiet night. Leaving behind more than just an apology, he left a new path, one waiting to be taken. The night had passed quietly, but Ramon barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the documents still resting on the small table beside her. Mazar's offer was real. and his words had shaken something inside her, a part of her. Wanted to believe this was a new beginning. Another part still felt unsure, carrying the weight of her mother's pain in the early morning light. Farida entered the room with a glass of warm milk. She sat beside Ramon, brushing her fingers through her daughter's hair. "You haven't slept," she said gently. Ramon nodded. "I kept thinking, what if this is all too good to be true?" Farida smiled softly. "It's okay to question, but don't let fear stop you from walking toward the light." Ramon sat up, hugging her knees. "But what if? People at the company look at me like I don't belong." She asked, "What if they know my mother was fired there?" Farida looked into her eyes and said, "Then you show them your strength, not your past." Just then, a car horn echoed outside. Ramon peeked through the curtain and saw a black company car parked quietly. The driver stepped out, dressed in uniform, holding a folder in one hand. It was time. She got ready quickly. Wearing the best clothes, she had a clean blue camise and neatly pressed trousers. Her mother tied her hair back and adjusted her dupatta. "You look just like I did when I started my first job," she said with pride in her voice. Ramon smiled. "Except you were braver." Farida touched her face. "No, you are." As she stepped into the car, her heart pounded. The ride to the company building felt long, even though it was just 30 minutes away. She looked out the window at the people on the streets, wondering how many of them were hiding old wounds just like her mother had for so long. When they reached the tall glass building, the driver opened the door for her. Mazar was waiting near the entrance, this time dressed formally, his face calm but serious. "Welcome, Ramon," he said politely. "Let's begin." He walked her inside, introducing her to the receptionist and guiding her to the HR department. She was given a visitor's badge, but her documents had already been prepared. The job offer was Rial Shea would be joining the public relations team as a trainee. "I want you to learn, grow, and lead," Mazar said. "Not because of the past, but because I believe in your future." Ramon nodded slowly, still overwhelmed. She was taken to her desk. A small space with a computer and some files. The room was filled with young employees, some whispering when they saw her arrive with the boss. One of them, a girl with sharp eyes, leaned over and whispered just loud enough, "Must be nice to walk in with the CEO." Ramon heard it but didn't react. Instead, she sat quietly, opened a notebook, and began reading her training material. She knew she'd have to prove herself, not just as an employee, but as someone who didn't ride on pity. At lunch, she sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria. A few eyes watched her, some with curiosity, others with judgment. But one young man came over and said, "Hi, I'm Samir. I work in accounting. Want to join our table?" She looked up, surprised, then smiled gratefully. "Sure." They talked about safe topics, weather, food, and first-day nerves. Samir didn't mention her connection to Mazar, and she appreciated that. For the first time that day, she felt a little normal. When the day ended, Mazar called her into his office. He asked how she felt, what she learned, and if she had any questions. Ramon looked at him carefully and said, "I don't want special treatment. I want to earn everything, even respect." Mazar nodded. "You will, I'm sure of it." She stood up to leave, but then paused at the door. "My mother still hasn't forgiven you, and I don't know if I will either," she said quietly. "But you gave me a second chance, and I'll use it." He gave her a slight smile. "That's all I hoped for," as she walked out of the office. The glass door closed behind her, and, just like that, her journey had truly begun, not as the daughter of a woman who was wronged, but as a woman writing her own story. Days turned into weeks, and Ramon settled into her new job slowly. The office was bright and busy, filled with people in formal clothes and busy schedules. But behind the smiles and handshakes, she could feel the silent judgment in the air. Some saw her as the girl the boss brought in. Others whispered about her being the daughter of the fired maid. Every morning, she walked in with her head high, even when it wasn't easy. She remembered what her mother had said. Respect is earned with your work, not your name. So she worked harder, arriving early, staying late, completing tasks. With care, she never complained, even when given the toughest reports or the most boring files. One day, her manager, Mr. Faison, handed her a report and said with a cold tone, "If you really deserve to be here, finish this by tomorrow. No shortcuts." Ramon took the papers and nodded. Yes, sir. That night, she stayed up past midnight, highlighting pages, taking notes, double-checking data. Her hands were tired, her eyes burning. But her heart kept saying, "You have to prove yourself." When she submitted the report the next day, Mr. Faison was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Well done." Without even looking at her, that was all she needed. But the hardest part came when Farida visited the office for the first time. She had come to drop off some homemade lunch, her way of saying she was proud as she stepped into the lobby. Employees stared, recognizing her. Some smiled politely, others looked uncomfortable. But Mazar came down himself to greet her. He stood before Farida, his voice low and sincere. "I never got the chance to say it properly, Farida." "I'm sorry." Farida looked at him, calm but strong. "I lived years with shame because of one decision you signed," she said. "I know," he replied, "and I'll never forgive myself for that, but I hope." "Maybe one day you will." Ramon stood nearby, watching her mother face the man who had once ruined her future. It felt like a test, not just for him, but for both women. Farida didn't answer him right away. She simply handed Ramon the lunchbox and said, "Eat on time," then turned and left. That silence said everything. It was not forgiveness, but it was not hate either. It was a line drawn between the past and the present. Mazar stood quietly, not insulted, but accepting. Some wounds take longer to heal. Later that day, a senior employee named Zara approached Ramon in the hallway. "I was here when your mother was fired," Zara said. "I was just a junior back then. But I remember it clearly." Ramon froze, unsure what would come next. Zara continued, "It was wrong. I knew it even then, but I was too scared to speak." "I'm sorry." Ramon didn't know what to say. Zara placed a hand on her shoulder. "You being here, it's justice in its own way." That small moment gave Ramon strength. She realized that change doesn't always come with loud speeches. Sometimes it starts with quiet courage. At home, that evening, Ramon told her mother everything. Farida listened quietly as she washed the dishes. Then she said, "I don't know if I'll ever forgive him, but I'm glad you're getting the future I once dreamed of." Ramon sat beside her and whispered, "We're writing a new story, Amy, together." The next day, Mazar called Ramon into his office again. He handed her a letter and invitation to represent the company at a youth leadership event. "You've earned it," he said. She was stunned. "Me? But I'm just a trainee." He smiled gently. "That's what they'll think. But when you speak, they'll know who you really are." As she walked out of the office holding the letter, something in her heart felt lighter. She wasn't just someone's daughter now. She was becoming someone her mother could be proud of. Not because she was proving people wrong, but because she was proving herself right. The sky turned gray that evening. Dark clouds gathered quietly above the city, just like they had weeks ago when Ramon first met the old man with a flat tire. But this time, the rain didn't bring fear or sorrow. It brought something else. A feeling that something was about to change. Ramon stood at her window, holding the invitation letter in her hands. Tomorrow, she would speak in front of hundreds of people at the youth leadership event. She had practiced her words, written and rewritten her speech. But still, her heart beat fast, not out of fear, but because of how far she had come. Her mother walked in with a cup of tea. "You'll be amazing," Farida said softly, sitting beside her. Ramon looked down at the cup, then at her mother's gentle face. I wish I could take you on stage with me, she whispered. Farida smiled. I'll be there, watching from the front row, and that's more than enough. The next day, the sky was still cloudy when the event began. Ramon arrived at the auditorium with her heart full of mixed emotions. There were banners, lights, and camera crews everywhere. She saw students from top universities, professionals, and even business leaders in the crowd. And among them she saw Mazar, seated quietly at the back, not in the VIP seats, but among the regular audience. He looked at her and gave a small nod. No words, just support. When Ramon was called to the stage, the crowd clapped politely. She walked to the microphone, took a deep breath, and looked out into the sea of faces. Then she began. My name is Ramon Zafar, she said, and I'm standing here today not because everything in my life was easy, but because I chose not to give up. She spoke about her mother, about dignity, struggle, and the value of kindness. She didn't hide her past, she shared it openly. She told them how her mother was fired unfairly, how it shaped their life, and how one act of kindness changing a stranger's opened a door she never expected. The room was quiet, her words heavy with honesty. She finished her speech with a line that came from the heart. Sometimes, life gives you a second chance not to change your past but to change someone else's future. The crowd stood and clapped, this time louder, with meaning. Her mother stood too, tears in her eyes, filled with pride, and from the back row, Mazar stood silently, his hands clapping slowly. A man who once made a mistake, now witnessing the strength of the one he once wronged. After the event, many people came to meet her students, journalists, even other women who had similar stories. Some called her brave, others called her inspiring, but Ramon only smiled and said, I'm still learning. Later that night, as she and her mother walked home, the rain finally began to fall. Not a heavy storm, but soft, quiet drops, like the sky was washing away something old. They didn't rush to hide. Instead, they stood in it, laughing as they got soaked. Mazar's car pulled up beside them slowly. He rolled down the window. Need a ride? He asked with a small smile. Ramon looked at her mother, who nodded gently. They both got in, and for a moment there was peace inside the car. I saw your speech, Mazar said quietly. You spoke with truth and grace. Ramon smiled. Thank you. He turned to Farida. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I hope you saw that I'm trying to do better. Farida looked out at the rain, then said, We can't undo the past, Mr. Mazar, but maybe we can stop it from repeating. He nodded. That's all I hope for. As the car moved through the quiet streets, something had shifted, not just in the air, but in their hearts. The past still existed, but it no longer controlled the present. Back at home, as Ramon changed into dry clothes, she looked into the mirror, not as the girl from a small, broken home, not as the daughter of someone wronged, but as a woman who had turned pain into purpose. And beside her stood a mother whose silence once held sadness, now holding pride. The rain kept falling outside, but inside their little home, there was only warmth, because sometimes redemption doesn't come with big apologies. Sometimes it comes with small steps, honest efforts, and the courage to try again. And for Ramon and her mother, the future was finally beginning with open skies and no more fear.